Winter criticism, Saturday, strange day. Saturday is kind of, I don't know, Saturday. Let's read Russia Today. It's been a long time. They don't have an app, but that's fine. It's almost fine because, as you could see here in the breaking news, Lavrov and Rubio hold phone call, but this red breaking news is nothing. Look. Or is started to work, or is working now. Who knows? Let's read. February 15th, Lavrov and Rubio hold phone call. Russia's foreign minister and the US Secretary of State agreed to maintain regular contacts, including preparations for a meeting between Putin and Trump. Interesting. So that is from today, breaking news. Well, that's the most important news from Russia today, I guess. I guess that's the way the cell phone site is working. Who knows? There's a photograph of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov there. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Saturday. The top diplomats agreed to hold regular contacts, including coordinating preparations for a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump. The call comes just days after Putin and Trump held a phone conversation marking the first known direct interaction between leaders of the two nations since the escalation of the Ukraine conflict in February 2022. The two presidents agreed to continue dialogue, arrange an in-person meeting in a third country, and make reciprocal visits going forward. So yeah, good news. According to a statement by the Russian Foreign Minister, Lavrov and Rubio reaffirmed their readiness to work together on restoring a mutually respectful interstate dialogue. The top diplomats agreed to hold regular contacts, quote, including on preparing a Russian-American meeting at the top level, end quote. The two men also undertook to arrange a meeting in the nearest future involving relevant experts to find ways out of the diplomatic deadlock of recent years that has seen Russian and US diplomatic missions severely curtailed as a result of tit-for-tat expulsions and closures of consulates. The Russian side reported that Lavrov and Rubio discussed the Ukraine conflict and the situation in Gaza. Trump informed reporters on Wednesday that he anticipates a face-to-face meeting with Putin in Saudi Arabia. Quote, "We will meet in Saudi Arabia, see if we can get something done," the American leader said. Who said that, Trump or Rubio? Senior U.S. officials, including Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, will reportedly head to Saudi Arabia in the coming days to kick off peace talks involving Russian and Ukrainian negotiators. Major European powers are not expected to participate, according to Politico, citing its sources on Saturday. And that was all. I really hope this kind of breaking news, red breaking news, they finally start working, because last time it didn't work. It was not refreshed, never refreshed. It was a very old news. It was this very one, this very one, like right here. I guess this is the problem. Look, this breaking news here. It's been there for just way too long ago. And it's nothing. It's just an article. Anyway, so the Russia is not so beautiful, but it's nice too. It's nice. February 15, EU nations secretly discussing Ukraine troop deployment, AP. Russia has previously warned that foreign forces deployed to the country without Moscow's consent will be quote-unquote legitimate targets. And there's army personnel in the photograph. A number of European Union member states have been discussing plans to send their military personnel to Ukraine once hostilities end, the Associated Press has claimed. Several senior EU officials, most notably French President Emmanuel Macron, have been floating such ideas since at least last February. In its article on Friday, the AP reported that the UK and France are, quote, at the forefront of the effort. The media outlet quoted British Prime Minister Keir Starmer as stating on Thursday that, quote, if there is peace, then there needs to be some sort of security guarantee for Ukraine, and the UK will play its part in that, end quote. US President Donald Trump's victory in the November 5 election galvanized such deliberations among European leaders, the publication alleged. It further suggested that a group of leaders and ministers from the UK, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Poland, as well as Ukraine, NATO, and the EU held a meeting in Brussels in December, where they presumably discussed a potential Western troop deployment to the Eastern European country. The AP quoted Estonian Defense Minister Hanno Pevkur as noting on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference that, quote, we are in a very early stage, end quote. The official pointed out that much will depend on the situation along the roughly 1,000 kilometer, 600 mile long front line, as well as the number of troops Russia and Ukraine will keep in the area, if and when any truce took hold, according to the article. Last month, Reuters quoted Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky as insisting that the expected European nations to send 200,000 troops to his country. Quote, it's a minimum, otherwise it's nothing, end quote. He remarked, according to the news agency. Also in January, The Times, citing anonymous military and diplomatic sources, reported that Germany, as well as the Baltic states and Poland, opposes any potential deployment for various reasons, with the UK, France, and the Nordic nations being in favor. Earlier this month, the New York Times quoted an unnamed senior European official as saying that quote, the continent doesn't even have 200,000 troops to offer, apparently referring to Zelensky's reported demand in January. Speaking late last month, senior Russian diplomat Rodion Miroshnik warned that, quote, any contingent entering the territory of Ukraine without the consent and permission of Russia is a military target with quite understandable consequences, end quote. In an interview with RAI Novosti on Monday, Russia's permanent representative to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, echoed his colleague's statement, emphasizing that, quote, peacekeepers cannot operate without a mandate from the UN Security Council, end quote. Let's read all about Russia today. Let's read some secret here. EU nations secretly discussing Ukraine troop deployment. February 15th. Russia has previously warned that foreign forces deployed to the country without Moscow's consent will be legitimate targets. Oh, Europe, yeah, look, let's read this. There's more soldiers there. It says, a number of European Union member states have been discussing plans to send their military personnel to Ukraine once hostilities end, the Associated Press has claimed. Several senior EU officials, most notably French President Emmanuel Macron, have been floating such ideas since at least last February. In its article on Friday, the AP reported that the UK and France are, quote, at the forefront of the effort. The media outlet quoted British Prime Minister Keir Starmer as stating on Thursday that, quote, if there is peace, then there needs to be some sort of security guarantee for Ukraine, and the UK will play its part in that, end quote. US President Donald Trump's victory in the November 5th election galvanized such deliberations among European leaders, the publication alleged. It further suggested that a group of leaders and ministers from the UK, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Poland, as well as Ukraine, NATO, and the EU held a meeting in Brussels in December. I'm just reading the same thing, I guess. I'm reading the same thing. I'm sorry. I'm reading another thing. NATO boss tells Europe to stop complaining. At some point I confused myself. The bloc Secretary General has urged European leaders to present actionable solutions to the Ukraine conflict. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has urged European members of the bloc to stop complaining about getting sidelined in peace talks and discussions on Ukraine's future, and to take action instead. Speaking at the Munich Secretary Conference, MSC, on Saturday, Rutte emphasized the need for actionable ideas, including on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the bloc's effort to ramp up its defense spending. Quote, get into the debate not by complaining but by coming up with concrete ideas, he stated. Rutte also urged the bloc's members to ramp up their military spending, pointing out that despite previous commitments, many countries have yet to meet agreed upon defense expenditure targets. The NATO chief also confirmed the US-led bloc was expected to reach a new agreement on spending targets during the upcoming summit of the organization scheduled for June. European members of NATO have sounded the alarm over the possibility they could end up sidelined in potential peace negotiations to resolve the nearly 3-year-long Ukraine conflict, following a phone call between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his US counterpart Donald Trump on Wednesday. It is the first publicly known top-level contact between the U.S. and Russian leadership since the escalation of Ukraine conflict in February 2022. On Thursday, 7 European nations and the EU Commission insisted they needed to be a part of any future negotiations on Ukraine, saying that their exclusion will make a lasting peace impossible. Quote, our shared objectives should be to put Ukraine in a position of strength. Ukraine and Europe must be part of any negotiations, they said in a joint statement after a ministerial meeting in Paris, adding that a just and lasting peace in Ukraine is a necessary condition for a strong transatlantic security, end quote. Washington, however, has signaled that European powers may not find a seat at the table. Trump's special envoy on Russia and Ukraine, Kate Kellogg, said at the MSC on Saturday that Kiev will undoubtedly be present, but that Europe may not be. Quote, what we don't want to do is get into a large group discussion, end quote, he explained it. And well, that's it. I'm just going to read the headlines. No place for Europe in Ukraine talks, Trump envoy. That is strange. No place for Europe in Ukraine talks, Trump envoy. Now I understood what I just read today's morning on CGTNs. Although the Europeans may not be at the table, their region's interests will be taken into account, Kate Kellogg has said. Kellogg is like English surname, but definitely Kellogg. I'd say a cornflake. Kate Cornflake. Yeah, this is a provocation. Now I understood. I guess I'm going to do it. Look, Europe may not be at the table when the US holds talks with Russia over Ukraine. US Special Envoy Kate Kellogg said on Saturday at the Munich Security Conference. However, Kiev will undoubtedly be present, he added. Kellogg clarified that the interests of other concerned parties will be taken into account. Quote, what we don't want to do is get into a large group discussion, end quote, he added, quoted by CNBC. Russian President Vladimir Putin and his counterpart Donald Trump discussed possible Ukraine negotiations during a phone call on Wednesday following the conversation. The Trump said that American and Russian officials will meet in Munich on Friday, with Ukraine also invited to participate. However, no such meeting was announced by the conference or media outlets. When asked if he could name the requirements for a credible security guarantee for Ukraine, Kellogg replied, quote unquote, the answer right now is no, noting that he was attending the Munich conference to target insights from Ukraine and Europe. Just one second. I just left the bus, and well, I'm going to finish the news. The answer right now is no, noting that he was attending the Munich conference to gather insights from Ukraine and Europe. He opined, how to say that? I guess you say opined. He opined that the US sometimes has a tendency to view issues solely from its own perspective. Definitely. So this definitely a provocation. The U.S. maybe don't even understand. Yeah, Americans, they are absolutely dumb. They don't even see how dumb they are. I know some American citizen. They don't even understand until they get blocked. Anyway, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who attended the event as well, also insisted on the start of direct negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. Quote, "It's important for us to get together and start to have the conversations that are going to be necessary to bring this thing to a close," end quote, he said. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said coming negotiations could mark a watershed in EU-US relations. Quote, "The US expects Europe to take the lead in securing any agreement that follows. These negotiations can be a turning point for our continent and transatlantic relations, a historic turning point that can go in very different directions," end quote. However, Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó has cautioned that some vested interests want to sabotage the peace process. Quote, "The European pro-war liberal elite will try to do everything in its power to ensure that the peace agreement that ends the war in Ukraine is not reached, which is currently closer than ever," the diplomat said. Yeah, definitely. So NATO is still kicking.